The nurse said it calmly, like this wasn't the scariest moment of my life. I was in severe pain, internal bleeding after a car accident, but my eyes went straight to the waiting area. My twins, 3 years old, sitting on the floor with snacks, swinging their legs, waiting for me. I called my parents. My mother answered. I explained everything quickly, the surgery, the bleeding, how I just needed them to watch the twins for a few hours. She exhaled sharply. You always do this at the worst times. She said, your sister has Taylor Swift tickets tonight. We're leaving soon. I thought she was joking. Then my father took the phone. You wanted independence, he said. Handle it yourself. Hospitals have people for this. I looked through the glass wall at my children, unaware that their mother was about to be wheeled into surgery alone. I didn't beg. I didn't raise my voice. Before hanging up, my mother added, you've always been a burden. Maybe this will finally teach you something. I stared at the phone after the call ended. That's when I understood something clearly. People who speak the loudest about strength disappear when responsibility shows up. The nurse called my name again. I kissed my twins on the forehead, asked a hospital volunteer to sit with them for a moment, and followed the stretcher toward the operating room. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I went quiet. They thought they had won. They had no idea what I was about to do next. I stayed with my grandfather after the surgery. He never asked why my parents hadn't shown up. He just helped, watching the twins, cooking meals, sitting nearby during long nights when pain made sleep difficult. That silence did more for me than any apology ever could. When I could move again, I focused on rebuilding slowly, quietly. While the twins slept, I worked, learned new skills, took on extra projects. I didn't post about progress or explain myself to anyone. I stopped calling my parents, not out of anger, out of clarity. Meanwhile, their lives grew louder. My sister's plans started falling apart. Money arguments became common. Family calls were filled with complaints, excuses, and blame. Somehow, my name still came up, always framed as concern. She must be struggling alone. She'll come back when she needs help. But I wasn't struggling. I was stabilizing. My days became calmer. My home became peaceful. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I was simply building a life that didn't require permission. The gathering was quiet at first. Polite smiles, careful questions. My parents asked about the twins, about work, like nothing had ever happened. Then someone mentioned the surgery. My father chuckled lightly. That was a rough time, he said, but she managed. That's when my grandfather spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. When she went into surgery, he said, she had no idea who would take care of her children. Because you chose not to. The room went still. She didn't call again. She didn't beg, he continued. She healed here. She worked here. She raised her twins here. My mother's face tightened. My father stared at the floor. I didn't add details. I didn't defend myself. I just said, that experience showed me what independence really means. They apologized. Quietly. Late. I nodded, but I didn't step back into old roles. Some distance protects growth. As I left with my twins, my grandfather placed his hand on my shoulder. Silence had already done its work. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They didn't know I was simply busy becoming strong. Acing. Relatives noticed the twins were thriving. Someone mentioned my new work. Someone else said I looked lighter. There was a family gathering planned soon. Word reached my parents. Life didn't change overnight after that gathering. It changed quietly. My parents started calling more often. Messages softened. Invitations followed. They spoke carefully now, like people who finally understood the cost of their words. I didn't block them. I didn't confront them. I just didn't rush back. My twins grew older in a home filled with calm. No shouting, no walking on eggshells. They knew my grandfather as safety, not emergency. They knew consistency, not excuses. Sometimes my parents asked, "Why are you still distant?" I never answered directly because the truth was simple. Distance wasn't punishment. It was protection. I had learned that love without responsibility is just noise, and that peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being secure. I didn't rebuild bridges that led back to pain. I built boundaries that led forward. Watching my children laugh freely, I knew something for sure. I didn't lose a family that day in the hospital. I found my strength. Not everyone who hurts you deserves revenge. Some only deserve access, revoked quietly. Years passed, not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily, like everything else I had built. My twins grew into children who didn't flinch at raised voices because there were none at home. They learned routines, trust, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing someone will always show up. My parents were still present, but at a distance they hadn't chosen, only accepted. They saw the kids on holidays. They asked before giving advice. They listened more than they spoke. Something in them had shifted, not out of guilt, but realization. One afternoon, my son asked me a simple question while doing homework at the kitchen table. "Mom, why don't we go to Grandma and Grandpa's house like other kids do?" I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I finally had the right one, because our home is where we are safest. I said, "And sometimes loving people means loving them from the right distance." He nodded, satisfied. No confusion, no sadness. That's when I knew I had broken the cycle. My parents eventually tried to explain themselves. Age had softened them. Regret had slowed their voices. "We didn't know how strong you were," my mother said once. I smiled, not proudly, not bitterly. "You didn't need to," I replied. I did. They never asked me to come back into the old roles again. And I never offered. Some lessons don't end with apologies. They end with boundaries that stay in place. As I watched my children sleep that night, peaceful and unafraid, I understood the final truth. Silence didn't just save me. It rewrote what came after me. Power isn't proving people wrong. It's building a life so steady that their opinions no longer reach you. They didn't know what had changed. They just sensed that something had. I still didn't explain. I didn't correct assumptions. Some truths don't need announcing. They arrive on their own. They were still talking about me. I was already far ahead of them.